So, Shashank, thank you so much for giving us time. First question is about the sales number. Right now, we are looking at some changes in the market. So, how are you seeing? What are the biggest trends you have seen? One thing, obviously, I want to touch upon is also the pent-up demand. It's kind of easing down now. So, how do you see this?
So, if you're talking of the current financial year, 23-24, one obviously is that this is the first year where the industry PV will see volumes in excess of 4 million. So right now we have done about 3.89 million at the moment, Feb end. So it looks like it will be like a 4.21 million. So that's a one big in terms of volumes. Growth should be around that 8% mark or slightly above 8%. In terms of the supply position itself, and you referred to it in your question, since July of this year, the semiconductor crisis seems to have been behind us, and therefore you would have seen a sudden change in the volumes, monthly volumes in the industry post-July. And now consistently it is 360,000 and above. Used to be in that 320, 330,000 before that. Because of that, as a consequence, the huge number of pending bookings that you saw have come down, and the pent-up demand seems to have now sort of settled and is over. And now what we see is the volumes in the future will largely be driven by the actual retails which will happen. The inventory in the network, especially February end, if you see, is about 300,000 in inventory. This is a pretty good inventory to have in the network. So going forward, probably you will see a plateauing of growth rates, but obviously the economy is doing well, so the volume should continue to be high.
So one common inference is that the moment we see demand kind of settling down, we might see easing of a waiting period, but do we also see some kind of discounts going forward or some kind of price correction going forward?
Yeah, so that really depends on the production levels. Discounts actually are a function of the difference between the supply and the demand. So if you have supplies very close to the demand, even if the demand is low, it may not reflect in actual discounts. And of course, segment-wise it's different, powertrain-wise is different. To your question of what changes we have seen during this year, one was the supply improvement, volumes I mentioned. Then the powertrain, if you look at the powertrain, electric and hybrid also both went up. They are now about 2.3% of the market separately. So around 5% of the volumes coming from hybrid and electric. Last year it was just about 3.5%. In terms of the segment, SUVs have done very well. In fact, largely the growth has been fueled by the growth in SUVs and MPVs. So SUVs are now 50% of the market plus. So these are some major changes which we saw. So in terms of type of buying, replacement buying has come back again. That's gone up. In terms of the usage, the user type, fleet also seems to have gone up. So there are a lot of changes which we have seen, and it's like more like looking like a normal now. And therefore, I think next year is going to be very interesting.
And does this also reduce the waiting period right now? What's the scenario, right? What's the highest waiting period for which model is?
Yeah, so for Maruti Suzuki, if you recall, around the same time we had this discussion, and at that time I remember about just short of 400,000 was the pending bookings. Now it is like close to 200,000. Largely, if you talk of the largest waiting period, that is in Ertiga CNG, where we have about 75,000 pending bookings. We do about 15,000 a month. So that's like a 4.5-5 month waiting.
And how is CNG doing?
CNG is doing fantastic. Actually, if you see, CNG this year has grown about 53-54%. And Maruti Suzuki, obviously market leader, because we have the largest number of CNG models in the country, and we are the first to start way back in 2010. So market share is about 70% in CNG. And as far as Maruti Suzuki is concerned, of our total vehicle sales, about 26% is CNG. And if you look at from the industry perspective, then it's about 15% is CNG. as against diesel, which is 18%. So you actually see CNG and diesel coming close together. Now that's 15% for CNG and about 18% for diesel. And as I mentioned, 5% hybrid and electric. The balance is gasoline.
And any prediction for diesel variants right now?
So we are not in diesel space, but
market-wise?
Market-wise, I think it's been going down. Just 2-3 years back, it was 32-33%. And that was 2020. And then came down to about 23-24. This year's come down to 18. And I think going forward, if the fuel price difference, I'm talking about the fuel prices, gasoline and diesel price is a very small difference now, 5-6 rupees difference on an all-India average, weighted average basis in terms of the fuel. So, and the cost of having a BS6 RD compliant diesel has made the diesel pricing, the cost of acquisition, quite high. And that's, in terms of economic sense, it doesn't look like diesel will come back. But there is a segment, especially in the larger SUVs, where you still have a substantial diesel portion. But I think going forward, when you see turbos, when you see the CAFE 3 norms which will come in, that would require further investment in diesel technology. I think that would make it further uneconomical, and I would say that there should be a consistent drop in the diesel percentage.
So below 18%?
Yeah, absolutely, as we go along. And I think many of the manufacturers will start getting away from diesel, especially as we approach CAFE 3. And I would expect that percentage to keep coming down.
Now coming to the other powertrains or trends you mentioned, one is obviously the strong hybrid. How is it? How the strong hybrid versions doing?
It's picked up quite well. It's now doing almost like 9,000 units, 9,000 units every month. It's about maybe 2.1% of the overall market. Compared with the EVs, which are also doing about 9,000-10,000. In fact, this year, EVs should end up with something like a 97,000 units in the financial year. And hybrid should end up with something like 89,000. So it's like competing almost like on equal terms. In fact, last quarter, Q3, hybrids outsold the EVs. But they have been picking up, especially because there are some new models which have come in hybrid from other players as well, not just the Maruti Suzuki. So there, I believe both will do well. Hybrids, considering the late entry and considering the number of models, EVs, there are about 10 models currently in the industry, expected to go up to about 23, 24 in the next financial year, 24, 25 if we include. Hybrids are much lesser. There's just about 4 vehicles which are hybrid. Considering that, there seems to be a good competition in terms of the volumes. I think hybrids have that advantage in terms of the range anxiety not being there, whereas in EVs we still don't have that charging infrastructure. The cost of acquisition of EVs still remain high. Although I must say that with battery prices, if they come down, then probably the cost of acquisition of EVs will also come down. That's a big boost to EVs, of course, going forward. And of course, the elephant in the room, which is the GST rate for EVs, is 5%, whereas it is 43% for the hybrids. So taking all that into account, I think hybrids have done reasonably there.
And that is the reason you're betting on hybrids more, I guess. You will be bringing more hybrid models very soon.
Yeah, so it's like this. While I can't comment on the number of models we'll bring in a hybrid, but we have said that by 2030, we'll have about our powertrain distribution would look something like this: 15% EV, 25% hybrid, and about the balance 60%, maybe 30-35% CNG, some biogas, flexi fuel, and that's the way we will be achieving our emission targets. So if you do a quick calculation, like if 2030 is a 6 million market, Maruti Suzuki aims always at 50%, so 3 million for us, and 25% of that is hybrid, which is like almost 7.5 lakh. So surely with a couple of models, you may not achieve that 7.5 lakh. So does look logically, market should conclude that we will get more hybrids. Yeah.
So we'll have smaller models also with hybrid?
So as I said, it's difficult for me to tell you give you forward guidance in terms of the actual number of models, the segments or specific this. But I was just telling you the broad statistics by which you can actually make your own assessment.
Understood. So that kind of volume is not possible unless we have smaller models also. But
Other models.
how do you read Indian customers? They're ready to, even the smaller segment customers, they are ready for to pay extra for hybrid models. They are ready for that.
So I'm not commenting on the smaller thing. I'm just commenting on the increase in number of models. But generally speaking, a consumer will choose a particular powertrain looking at running cost and cost of acquisition. So that balance has to be brought out. And as I said, this is the current problem which you see in EVs, where the cost of acquisition still remains high. Even though running cost is lower, you still don't have that penetration of EV as was expected a few years back. Of course, there you have the additional issue of range anxiety, which isn't there in hybrid. But I would say it's not about hybrid versus electric. It is about, they are standalone technologies, and we believe a mix of technologies will prevail for every OEM if they have to achieve and they will have their own strategy to achieve the emission targets, which is given by the government regulations.
But in your case, you were definitely thinking about strong hybrids.
Absolutely.
Like strongly than the EVs.
In terms of volumes, you say 25% will be a strong hybrid, 15% will be EVs, and the balance, including CNG, will be 60%. CNG should be 35% or so. They're about 30-35%. So we are already at 26% for us. So that is, in that sense, you can say that this is the relative weightage. It also depends, by the way, on overall volumes and how much will be the overall EV market. So EV market, we are saying should be around the 20% mark by 2030. And it's currently at 2.3%. Last it was 1.6. I believe, statistically speaking, what we have is, I believe at 4.55% when the penetration happens, then there is that inflection point when the adoption rate of EV increases. And that also, of course, we have taken into account that 5% should come in that 22 years from now. We are at 2.3%. So 5% should come in that sort of period. And as you know, we will be introducing the EV also within that period. So I think we are at the right time. And once the adoption rate increases, it should go up to about 20% in by 2030.
So if you look at international market, the way EVs are doing these days and the kind of sentiments we have seen around EVs in US, in Germany, we have seen the production, is kind of reduced. Some of the subsidies going out in Germany, that has also resulted in some, negative growth. And at the same time, Elon Musk himself said that the growth is not going to be something which he was kind of anticipating. So internationally, how do you see EV market, and how you think that will be very much the case with Indian market also, or we will get into that zone when the battery prices will be like much lower, so we might skip that phase?
Yeah, clearly the battery prices are key if you have to keep the cost of acquisition down. But there seems to be a consensus that, first it will be the larger EVs, the larger segment, which will sort of break even on the consumer calculation point. And therefore, you would have seen that the EVs which are doing well are on the larger vehicle side, the SUVs, etc. The factor of prices for EVs versus gasoline is about 1.35 to 1.45, whereas for sedans it is still about 1.55, 1.6, and for hatches it is even higher, 1.65 to 1.75. So obviously the adoption rate depends on the type of segment. It will come last in the smaller cars. It also, within that category, comes by usage. So fleet users might be faster. So one is by segment. Within each segment, the type of fleet users will probably adopt the EVs faster. And of course, we have seen, we are talking of four-wheelers, but if you look at two-wheeler and three-wheeler, the adoption rate there would be faster, as you have already seen. But coming to your question about government subsidies, so they seem to have played a very important part in the development of the EV market across the globe, whether it is Thailand or whether it is China or even Norway, Germany, France, UK. And any withdrawal of subsidy, obviously subsidy can't go on forever. Withdrawal of subsidies would obviously impact. And what you are saying currently is the recent withdrawal which we saw in Germany, where it brought a sharp slowdown in terms of the demand. But there are markets which have gone up to as much as 85% EV, like Norway. In fact, in Norway, you see very few non-EV vehicles on the roads now, but they have been there for a very long time. But take US, where it is still in that 8-10% range. Germany is slightly higher, maybe now it's about 14%, 16%. Thailand is 8%. So clearly subsidy is playing very important role. And of course, future will depend on how quickly the battery prices come down. And in India, how quickly the charging infrastructure builds up.
So in a nutshell, if we look at companies, most of the manufacturers' sentiment, you think that a couple of years back, we were thinking that EV is the future. So they are in some kind of doubt. Maybe we should wait and watch whether only EV or as Suzuki or as Toyota has focused on strong hybrids, we should give that more importance now?
So clearly, the target is to meet the emission requirements. And to meet the emission requirement, different companies will follow different routes. So one thing is increasingly clear, that a multiple number of technologies will exist, but not necessarily that every OEM will have multiple technologies. So there are people who may not have strong hybrids, for example, or CNG, and may go only for electric. There may be some who will do a mix. But clearly, and the reason why people are saying that in the long run, in the ultimate run, EVs might have an upper hand, is because as the norms keep tightening, you would see probably other powertrains getting increasingly at a disadvantage. But that's like in the long run. And we don't know what that long run is. As progressively the tightening of emission norms happen, then each powertrain will start feeling the pinch or the pressure. Depends on what position of that emission curve that powertrain is. So that's what is our expectation. But at the moment, yes, for a long time, as we see, all technologies should coexist.
Okay, coming back to Indian market. So currently we saw one of the manufacturers, they mentioned that the rural market is kind of picking up. If you agree with that, or your data also says the same thing, how is it, and what can we read with that kind of data?
Yeah, so I think it's clear for the current year also. The rural growth, our data suggests, is about 11.7%. The urban growth is about 8.3%. So clearly there is a difference. Rural markets are doing well. But remember, and Maruti Suzuki, I have data for Maruti Suzuki, and we've been tracking this data since 2007. And in all the years since 2007, which is now about 17 years, rural growth have outpaced urban growth, except for 1 year, which was 2013, I think, where the urban growth rate was higher. There were years when they were like roughly similar, but then base is smaller. But now the base is also getting bigger for rural markets. Rural market is estimated now about 32-33% of the total market. For Maruti Suzuki, it is about 44%. So clearly their growth in rural incomes is faster. Of course, it's from a lower base. Still, if you say absolute income levels, rural is lower than urban, but the growth is faster. Second, there is a lot of investment going on in terms of infrastructure, and the government also investing big capital expenditure on the rural areas as well. So I think there are some very positive factors going in favor of rural consumption. And that is why you see this difference in growth. And this year is no different.
Now, how do you see the breakup variant-wise, top end? What kind of customers are looking for top end variants, and are they going for those variants? Are they going for sunroof more, or HUD or infotainment systems? How is it working now?
Yeah, so absolutely. If you look at the general trend, I would say more features. There is also a trend where the base the base variant also has more features than the earlier years top variant, maybe in some cases. So it's not just the percentage of course, the percentage of top variants is going up. It's now, I think, 43%. The top two variants, if you take on an average, used to be about 27% just 3-4 years back. It's now 43%. So top two variants are selling more. But more importantly, even the base variant has more features than what the middle or top variants had a few years back. So there is this additional feature requirement, and in that sense, a premiumization reflecting probably the aspiration of the consumer. But I also believe that there is a substantial chunk of consumers who maybe today are not buying cars, the entry-level hatches, for example, but may come back as their income levels improve and their affordability factor gets better.
And what about women customers? Any change in any new trend you've seen?
So if you look at the percentage of women buyers have increased, it used to be about 5-6% few years back. It is now on an average about 12%. But there are models, in our case, for example, Espresso, Celerio, where it is 15-16% also. And that is one part. But there's also the other part where if you see the women users are also more. So for example, the vehicle might be in my name, but may be used by my wife, for example. And if you see, especially in the larger cities, the women buyer percentage has not only gone up, the women user percentage has gone up even higher. So there was always this difference, by the way, but this seems to be. And one of the things which we have researched on especially in the women buyers, they are very difficult to understand, but we still try to understand. They are there are more women in the workforce now. Women are traveling more when it comes to going to their work areas, and a combination, and plus they are economically more independent. So that is all going in the favor of more consumption, and that is reflected in the car buying behavior as well. By the way, we are still far behind some of the other countries. Like US, there are majority of buyers are women, whereas we are far away from that. But definitely there has been an increase.
And traditionally, we have always closed our interviews with question regarding Jimny, but now that's not a question. It's already here. So how's it doing after the discount and everything? How you see that working?
Yeah, so that was a temporary thing, the discount thing, because that was really done in December, where we wanted to reduce our stock of the previous year. Cumulatively, we launched it in June of last year, 23. Cumulatively, we have done about 17,000 units in these 9 months, so approximately 2,000 or so, or slightly below that per month. Whereas I think when we started off, we were planning to do about 2,000 to 2,500. So in terms of the volume, especially the recent past, have been lower than our estimates. However, I think if you look at purely retail of December, for example, was 4,500 because of that extra sales promotion that we did. So we have found for Jimny, probably since it's a four-wheel drive, we need to look at the Indian and develop that market in India. I think when we looked at the 2,000 to 2,500 volume, we were assuming that market to be ripe and developed, the four-wheel drive off-roading type of market. Whereas, and the bookings reflected that. But I think a lot of those bookings were also about just the image of the vehicle rather than actual off-roading. And then some of the people complained about the higher price, but then it's a four-wheel drive. And that's something which we have realized, that we are now pushing for more experiential drive to develop that market. And in fact, you can see the rock and road SUV experiences, and this is a part of that, where we'll give those experiences to consumer of actual off-roading. That's where the Jimny excels.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for talking to Overdrive.